guys, welcome back to another video. Alex with Graveyard again, back with the ST. This time we are going to put on some Graveyard Performance coilovers. We make coilovers for the Focus ST platform and a variety of other platforms. They come in a GS series, a GL series, and a GR series. Get a lot of questions asking what each of those series includes and which one should they get for their car. Typically the S, the L, and the R stands for street, low, and race. So if you're just a street car and you just want to lower your car, have some height and damping adjustability, maybe add some camber plates to it, and you can dial your alignment in. They're a really comfortable coilover for just everyday driving. If you want to do the super low stance thing, the GL series gives a smaller shock body, allows you to get an extra inch or so drop on the car. So that's also a great option. Those do come with camber plates by default, so you can dial in, get some stance going if you need it. The GR series has a higher viscosity shock fluid, stiffer spring rates, also comes with the camber plates, and is more geared to somebody doing autocross racing, just a car that's going to be beat on a little bit more often. But today we're going to be putting on some GS series with the optional camber plate upgrade. These retail for $1049 currently. You can get them on our site. They take about 2 weeks to build. That truck's loud as f***. So right now my suspension is pretty much on its way out. I had to replace the rear shocks already, but it's just way too tall. I don't like this monster truck look that it's got going on. So we're gonna throw these coilovers on. It's gonna offer some extra stability when we're driving, be a little bit more responsive when we cut the wheel, and should just overall increase the handling and the overall look of the car. So coilovers are a super great option to kind of knock out a couple different things, whether it be actual performance and aesthetics at the same time. So yeah, we'll get started by pulling her in and showing you how to install these.
A few moments later.
Okay, so once you get your car in the air, first thing you want to do is just open up some of the space that is going to allow us to get to the top hats. So we can bust off these panels. They pull right off, pull them on both sides. Get those out of the way. It's going to free up a 10 mil. We'll pull right off on each side. Then you've got a T30 on each far corner of this little plastic shield. Then there's 4 clips going along the back of the stripping. You just pop those off with a flathead, and that should allow this panel to move freely and give us the room that we need to be able to get the bolts off the top of the OEM coilover. So this should be able to lift up, and you should be able to pull this part right on out. Give you access to the strut bar. Set it aside. Now that we've got our area up here to pull the bolts off of the coilover, we can move down under the car. So we'll put the car higher up in the air and take our lugs off, get the wheels off the car. Now that we have the wheel off, we're gonna get what's arguably the toughest bolt to get out on this job. The top end link that goes through the coilover right here. It is threaded with a 5mm Allen head, and then it's got a 15mm bolt around it. So I like to get a 15mm wrench, hold it like that, and then fit the Allen head through it. And since it's threaded, you're threading it in, you wanna spin the Allen head righty-tighty. And it should pop off just like that. All right, now that we got that end link disconnected, we're gonna take off this bolt on the bracket of the OEM strut that holds the brake line. It's an 8mm, if I'm not mistaken. Yes. All right, now that we've got the brake line disconnected as well as the end link, we only need to pull out this 15mm bolt that holds the strut into the spindle. So your biggest ugga-dugga should take this right out. Just like so. Okay, so now we're under the car and we've got the brake line, the end link, and the 15 that's holding the spindle together unbolted. we're going to prep for pulling the spindle off of that shock. So we actually want to take a pry bar or a big flathead and stick it right here in between where it separates in the spindle. And you want to use a hammer and kind of knock this in. Sometimes it can be tricky to get it to stick, but you want that tension because you want to split it open. Now before you start pulling on the spindle to bring it down off the shock, this control arm right here is being held in by an 18 bolt. And this 18 is holding a lot of upward pressure. So if you just back this out just a 1/4 inch or so, it's gonna make it come off way easier. So just like that, and I should have a lot easier time getting this spindle off that shock. So now the spindle is being jammed by the pry bar and we've got that 18 backed off a little bit, we're gonna try and pull down on this spindle to release it from the shock. Now, having the car on a lift and above me allows me to get a little bit more leverage and should make it easier for me. If you're working on the ground, you might need to hit it with a hammer or use your feet. So.
Gotta bring it down and push it.
Nah, that's right there.
Hang on.
Nah, I don't need any.
There you go. Your facial expressions were key off, man. I'm sorry.
Sure. Okay, now that we got the spindle disconnected from the OEM strut, we can start undoing the top hat bolts. Keep in mind, we're bouncing around on this. It's the same process on both sides, but they are 13 millimeter, 3 of them right here. Simple as can be. And when you do that last one, make sure you hold on to the strut. There we go. First strut out. Okay, so now that we have the coilover off the car, we've got a side-by-side with our Graveyard Performance coil, and you can see that the size difference is pretty noticeable. So we actually have adjusted these already to a rough starting height, which was about 2 inches taller than max low. So if you thread them all the way down, you're gonna see about a 4.5 decrease compared to the OEM strut. We brought it down to about 2.5, 3 inch decrease. So we'll be looking at about a 3 inch drop on these coils, but we can adjust that once those are on the car and dial it in exactly how we like. These coils do not come with any height settings already set. They don't come with any preload set, so we will get that dialed in once it's on the car. All right, so we are going to go ahead and put our coilover in the car. We just want to start by holding this into the wheel well and threading in one of the top hat bolts. That way the coil is being held up and we can go ahead and install everything without having to manually hold the coil up the whole time. So I'm gonna give my man John the bolt. He's gonna thread it in for me once I hold it up. We're just gonna be shooting for this hole right there. Should be good to go. All right, so that's being held up and we're good. So from there we can just hand thread all the other bolts in. Okay, so now that we've got these bolts threaded in, hand tight, we're gonna go ahead and tighten them down. They don't need to be crazy tight. These top hats are aluminum and you don't wanna strip them out. So, you know, just some light ugga-duggas. Just like so. Okay, so now that the strut is in with the top hat bolts, we're gonna go ahead and line up the spindle with this pole jack. You can also use a floor jack if you're working on jack stands. Once we get this lined up, we're gonna put our pry bar back into the spindle and line the strut up and put it right onto the coilover. A little bit of WD-40 might also help it slide in. Once you get the shock in, we're gonna put the end link in by the same method that we took it off with, just reversing the ugga-dugga. Now that we've got the end link secured, we're gonna secure our brake line. You can use a screw and a bolt. Now we're gonna put our bolt back in the spindle, just thread it through by hand, make sure it connects to the other side without catching on any of the threads. Once you know that it's going and you're not gonna strip it, you're gonna throw it back through. Once that's in, we're gonna put this 18mm back in using the heaviest gun we got. Make sure it's tight, you'll be good to go. But once you have everything bolted in, you do want to set your ride height as we did before, but we want to tighten down these locking collars. So use a spanner wrench and you'll go ahead and tighten these down by hand. Use your spanner wrench just to snug it in, make sure it's not going to come loose. That should be good. And then for the top one, we're going to set our preload. So this should already be backed off where I can spin it by hand pretty easily. So once you have it and the spring can jiggle a little bit, go ahead and tighten it up until it's about hand tight. Snug that locking collar to it, not too tight, but just enough to kind of mark your measurement. Once you set your locking collar right below it, you're gonna move this upward. And you just want that locking collar to stay where it was when it was hand tight, because we're gonna use the distance between that locking collar and where we move this upper collar to notify how much preload we're adding. Once you can fit that spanner wrench in between there, you can snug up that bottom locking collar and you'll be good to go. Just like that. And then tighten that bottom one down. And you're good to go. Okay, now you've got the front height and preload set. Well, we're gonna move to the back. We're gonna start by taking this 15mm bolt off the lower control arm. You wanna make sure you've got something supporting the weight of this control arm, because it's only going to be held in by this bolt. And once you lose that tension, that spring is gonna go flying. I'm gonna save this plastic perch. That's gonna help reduce some of the noise between the spring and your subframe. You don't want that noise. So now that we have the controller arm dropped, we're gonna grab the bolt off the back of the bottom of the shock. We already started this one, but yeah, just break it off. It's a 15mm, and then you can pull it out with ease. Got plenty of room up here to work. Once we get that shock dismounted from the bottom, we're gonna take the two bolts at the top. They're tucked up away up here. You need a deep 13. Extension recommended. And we're out. So comparing our previous shock to our shock, completely threaded in. There's about 1.5 to 2 inches of drop, so we're gonna go ahead and keep this at the max low setting. So we're just gonna thread this up there and thread the bolt on. Okay, so we do have the HLA, and this has a 22mm bolt on the bottom with a locking washer, as well as a spacer plate that will allow you to thread this into the bottom of the control arm. Now this HLA is how you adjust your rear spring height. So as a rule of thumb, we typically try to find the middle point, which is roughly about there. You move your bottom locking collar up. I'm gonna give it a little bit more. Right there should be pretty good. That's pretty much halfway. That's a great starting point for this. So we'll go ahead and thread these into the control arm and then set the spring on top of it. And don't forget this plastic or rubber insulator that'll sit on the top, and that will reduce the vibrations on metal on metal. Okay, so before we put the spring back on here and button the lower control arm up, let's go ahead and line the spindle up with the shock, because we just have a lot more room to work with while this is down. So we'll thread the 15mm back into the spindle. Okay, now we're gonna put the spring on the HLA, start to get this into place. We're gonna need to use our pull jack to support this, as there's no way we can support this by our hands and actually line everything up. Catch. Now right here I'm lining up the lower control arm to the slot in the spindle. I'm not too worried about the spring sitting on the HLA. Once we put the car into load, it should snap down onto that, and if not, we can get under the pry bar and snap it in. And once it's seated, you should be good. You may need a pry bar to line this up properly, so that's what I'm gonna grab. You want to use the pull jack to line the entry hole up to the spindle as you're going to try to feed the bolt through. Once you get everything buttoned up on the bottom side, don't forget to tighten down your locking collar on the rear. Okay, so once you get the rear done, don't forget to put the shroud back in the front with the 10 mil, the T30, and those 4 clips, and then take it for a test drive. See how it feels, change your height as needed, adjust that damping, kind of dial it in, find that sweet spot to see what fits your needs the best. And that kind of wraps up the install. If you guys have any questions, feel free to reach out to us, or if you want to purchase one of these sets for your car, we make them for more than just Focus ST. We can make them for pretty much any platform on the market. So feel free to reach out one of our reps, see what kind of deal we can work out with you, and don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Thanks for watching. Okay, so now that we have the bolts on the top hat secure, we're going to line the spindle back up onto the bottom of the strut. So we've got a tool. God, what is this called?
Pull jack, transmission jack.
All right. Nick, stay on your side. We rolling? And action! Nick's fired. So we're going to line up the spindle onto the OEM strut. We've got our pull jack. If you're working on the floor, if you just use like a floor jack, it should be plenty enough to line this up and take the load off of yourself. Pause. How many sales you made today? All right, anyways. Go on somewhere.
Okay.
Do you want me to finish?
$5,000 of that shit was on. You sold $1,700
What do you
today.
mean?
Stack it up.
What, labor? Somebody you charge?
That counts.
Yeah, you didn't do anything. You sold him.
Oh, right there.
Boom.
That's the money shot right there.
That's the money shot, bro. Hit it with that. All right.
Get in there, Tyler. Speed this
I
process.
really don't like people just sitting here watching me. Can y'all go find something to do?
Tyler actually knows how to install suspension.
Oh, no, I bet he does. If I wanted anybody's help, I'd ask Tyler's before I'd ask y'all.
Really? Because you already asked Brian.
Yeah.